The coyote around here, as we know it, is not only a scavenger and will eat just about anything, but when they get into overpopulation and they start to get where their food supply runs low, they get into livestock, they get into sheep, calves, you name it, they get into it. So when you're hunting them, you got to remember there's three important things about a coyote. If they'll eat anything, they'll certainly come into one of your calls. Now the three things about the coyote that I think we should know is the three senses they have are far more superior to ours, and that's their sight, their hearing, and their sense of smell. Now, to take care of the sight bit, you got to make sure you've got a good camo. And the other thing you got to make sure is when you're on a watch or you've set up somewhere, what I mean by set up is you've snuck into somewhere nice and early, you've picked out a little spot before you know you're going to sit down and call from. You can see all around you in every direction, and you're sitting where you have a little bit of cover. Now, what you want to do is when you sit down, you want to make sure that's where you're going to sit, because once you start calling, you can't move. You got to stay there. You got to remember their sight is so good that if you even raise a hand to wipe your nose, he's going to see you. And you got to remember that any movement at all, that coyote's going to pick up. So when you get a coyote coming in, you got to stay still. I mean, don't move. Don't start to turn with the gun if he comes in a little bit one way. Just sit there and wait. Let him get nice and close before you make your move. Now, another thing with the coyote you got to realize is a sense of hearing. Now, in that clip you seen, one of the first clips in the video there, where the coyote comes in, you see him come up the hill, and he's coming up the hill this way, and all of a sudden you hear, if you listen real close, you hear a little click. That was my safety was froze, and my safety came off. It just made the tiniest little tick, and the camera picked it up because the gun was right over the camera. And that coyote stopped and turned and looked my way. Now you got to remember that their hearing, if you look at their big ears, they can hear a long ways. They have really good hearing, so you want to be sitting quiet. You don't want to be fidgeting around with your hands or loading your gun once you sit down. When you get out of the truck and you're over the fence, you want to load your gun up and start walking. You don't want to be sitting there fiddling with shells when you're just before you start calling. Your hearing's very sensitive, very sensitive. And the other thing you got to worry about is their sense of smell. Now, the best days of calling, I've always found, were the days where there's no wind. Now, a lot of things come into play with that. It's not just because they don't have the wind to smell you. I think it's more or less that on those days that it's not windy and it's just, you know, you get those dead still mornings, that the call is going to carry so much further. If you get a good call that's got a good rasp and a real good clean wah to it, that call, you'll hear it on a real crisp cold morning with no wind. You'll hear it echo for miles, and that's what you want. You want your call to get out, because the further it gets out, the more ground it's going to cover to call in more coyotes. Now, their sense of smell, if you go into a spot and a coyote comes in and winds you, and what I mean by when he winds you is you got the breeze in your back, or you got the wind in your back, and he circles around, he'll stop, and he'll probably, if he smells you at all, he'll stop and look your way, and he might just stand there, he might get held up right there, he might circle around and leave. But you got to remember that if he smells you, you're done. You better pick your shot and take it, because once he smells you, it's over. Game over. He smells you and he knows what you are. Now, I found that you can use certain products on the market to help cover your scent or get rid of your scent, but the best thing I found is just to make sure you don't stink. Make sure you have a good shower or whatever, and you don't smell like any perfumes or strong soaps or deodorants. Not taking a shower, I don't think helps you at all. I think they'll smell you even more. But the best way is to play the wind. Now, on the real windy days, sometimes it don't matter. As you'll see in this next video clip, this coyote comes in, and I've got the wind in my back, and it was blowing pretty hard. Like, I'm surprised he even heard it. But this coyote come in, and I've seen it lots of times. They'll come in, and they'll be coming in, and the wind's in your back, and they smell you, and they come in, but they're not sure because it's so windy. They're not sure what they're smelling, and they'll come in so far and they'll just stand there and they'll get their nose up in the air and smell you. So you got to remember those things when you're calling. They got really good sight, they got really good hearing, and they got a great sense of smell. So try to keep all those in mind when you're calling, and I'm sure you'll do quite well.